I did a little channeling before we started. Do not doubt your power. That we all have the ability to connect and that we are all divine souls. And sometimes our lives make it difficult to remember our own divinity and that we all have power. And so if you're listening, like this is your sign to do that.
We are beyond thrilled to introduce you to intuitive Holly Franke. As Holly says, I am not a shaman, I am not a guru, I am just a woman who remembered her intuitive power. And while we refer to her as an intuitive, people in her community sometimes refer to her as the psychic soccer mom. Holly is all about spiritual practice in real life. If you're looking for a boots on the ground approach to connecting to your intuition, spirit guides, and angels, she's your girl. Through her readings and intuitive coaching, Holly makes the mystical feel totally accessible. She helps people connect in practical, easy ways because, as she puts it, life is full, beautiful, and messy at times, and it is okay for spirituality to be the same. Karen and I had a reading with Holly, and let me tell you, it was beyond. Not only did she tap into exactly what we needed to hear right now, but she also left us with clear, actionable guidance that has already made an impact on our lives, sprinkled with a little bit of what feels like magic. Holly believes that we all have the ability to connect to the universe, the divine, our spirit guides, whatever you want to call it. And she sees it as her honor to help people awaken their own spiritual gifts. So if you've ever felt like there's something more that you're meant to tap into, Holly is the guide you need. Let's get going. Hi, Holly.
Hi, Holly.
Hi,
So good to have you with us.
I'm so excited to be here.
And what's so fun about this conversation is we're not always right off the reading that we've had with a guest on our podcast, and we pretty much are on this one. So there's a lot of really good, fresh information for us to talk about. But before we get started, we talked about intuition a lot in the intro, and I think for a lot of people who are listening, intuition means different things. How do you define intuition for you?
To me, it almost feels like a navigation system, like in a car. And it's an internal navigation system. And you get this information on your life's journey, and you can either follow it and your journey gets a little bit more smooth, maybe less traffic, or you can do a different turn and you'll still get to your destination, but like the minutes keep climbing up and up. So to me, it feels like an internal guidance system is the best way I can describe it.
Oh, I love that. That's a really good way of putting it. And for you, how did you really start to develop that navigation system? Did something in early childhood happen that started making you pay more attention? What made you feel like you can now say you're an intuitive and you help others with their own intuition?
So I have always been really intuitive, but it's actually really funny is that I didn't want to be. So I remember seeing my grandmother after she passed away. And when I was a freshman in college, I had a friend who passed away and I saw them and I would just know things and I really didn't want to know them. I just so desperately wanted to be normal. So I pushed it away for so many years. And I remember vividly one night I was nursing my son and I felt like a dark, like a shadowy kind of figure come in because I was really vibrating at like a lower frequency. I'm really just diving in here. But
Listen, good. We're
I
all
had
about
really,
that.
okay, I had really bad postpartum depression. So I was at a very low frequency and unknowingly calling that in. And so I was super open already and then calling this in and it scared me so bad. I just said, please, I just want to be normal. I don't want to see and know things anymore. And I successfully really pushed it away for many years. And then I have two little boys, and they are both super intuitive in very different ways. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I have to learn how to do this so I can teach my kids how to manage it. Because if I don't want them to grow up like I do. And what I always tell people is that being intuitive or a psychic is not a gift, it's your birthright. But growing up in a house where you know how to manage it, that's the true gift. And so that's what really got me going on it.
And when you say you saw things when you were younger, even seeing, you said your grandmother who had passed away, what did that mean to you? And were you able to tell anybody at the time?
So I remember telling my mom, it was really interesting because I was only in high school and my grandmother passed away, and there was a big legal battle over her estate. And she came to me and told me this is not what she wanted, and she did not want it to be like this at all. And I relayed the message, but I don't remember it ever landing. And then when I saw my friend in college, I had told my boyfriend at the time, and I remember him saying, "That is so weird and creepy. Don't tell people that." And then I also went to a really religious school when I was younger, and it was ingrained that this is evil, and it's really not. And so I am so excited to have my kids grow up knowing that it's okay to know things and it's okay to tap into energy and just to teach them how to do it wisely and responsibly.
Yeah, and I think that to just underscore the difference between intuition and psychic ability, because I think Robin and I would both say we're intuitive. I don't necessarily feel like I'm psychic, like I don't see spirits or anything like that. And I think sometimes when people even go down the intuitive route, they're concerned that
Yeah.
will come with it in some shape or form. And it doesn't necessarily. It's just that inner knowing that you have. Can I just do a quick follow-up? Because
Yeah.
Robin talked about this offline before, this idea of motherhood being almost like this portal or this touchstone or this gateway to that, almost taking that intuitive ability to the next level, whether that be psychic level or just that inner knowing just comes up more, especially for people who may have pushed down those psychic gifts earlier in their life. Did you feel that was in any way relevant for you when you became a mom?
Oh yeah, 100%. And as you're talking, so I get physical signs from my team and I have like full body chills and my hair is getting
Oh,
touched and yeah, but definitely my older son had a heart defect when he was born and he had to have surgery when he was 3 weeks old. And I was a basket case right up until they wheeled him down to the OR. And as soon as he left, I just heard so clearly, everything's going to be fine. And I was so calm and so relaxed. And my husband, I remember him saying, "What is going on? You were crawling up the wall and now you're totally fine." And I just said, "I just know it's," and he was been fine ever since.
wow.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
I really do think it opens you up. And I don't think there's a mother out there who doesn't feel intuitive.
Yeah. And I think to what Karen's saying, I've found that as I have developed my skills and honed in on what could be considered psychic and or mediumship type of skills, like I have to be very directed about it. And I think when you're just getting going, which we're going to talk about in even tapping into your own, because I think we all have intuition. Everybody has intuitive abilities. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of how you develop them. And for you, when you were younger, you weren't even trying. It
Mhm.
was just coming to you, which doesn't happen for everybody. And
Yeah.
for Karen and I, we really have had to work on our skills and really connect into them. And when we talk about seeing people or seeing things, for me, I know it's in my mind's eye. Right. I don't
Mhm.
see anything outside of me. For you, what did that look like? I just think that helps people who are listening as they're trying to figure out what's happening to them or how do they develop them.
When I do a reading, it's all in my mind's eye. I don't see with my physical eyes. I was at an event and someone said, "Oh, is this a lot for you? Are you just seeing dead people everywhere?" And I said, "No, that's not how it works for me, at least. I can feel energy, but I think it's super important to have really strict boundaries. And your guides, your team, the other side, always respect your boundaries. And so if you say, I only want to tap into my intuition, I don't really want to take it to that next level, then you're not. And then if you change your mind and you say, I think I'm ready to play around with this a little bit more with your spirit guides, then that's what happens. But you have complete autonomy on how you get it, when you get it. And if you find that it's coming in other ways that you're not approving of, then that's a really big sign to revisit those boundaries, if that makes sense.
It really does. And I think as people are listening too, we realize that intuition slash psychic abilities, it's almost like a spectrum,
Yeah,
right? We were saying intuition, we all have it. It's, oh, I think I should call so and so today.
that's it.
Versus, oh, I'm thinking about my sister, and then the phone rings, right? That's another thing. Or you get a vision of your sister in your mind's eye. Oh my gosh, is she okay? I should call. So there's all those clairs that we've talked about before. You smell something, you can taste something, you could hear something, you can feel something, or you can see something in your mind. Or some people actually see dead people, but most people don't. Most people have various levels of all of these intuitive abilities that can lead to more of a psychic ability. But to your point, but if we meditate, we're sitting down and we're saying, okay, I'm inviting this experience into my sphere versus being out driving in a car and then all of a sudden having it come to you out of the blue. That's how we have to learn how to work with it in our own
Yeah,
way.
I totally agree. However, I only half answered your question, Robin. I did physically see with my eyes my grandmother and my friend from college. So
Wow.
that really blew my mind at the time
What does
when
that
I was.
look like, Holly?
Yeah, what does that look like?
So it was weird. My grandmother, it was just like her face, and it was her when she was much younger. And then my friend from college, I was woken up in the night and he was sitting at the foot of the bed, and I just like a light filled version of him talking to me. And
And
I was
you,
crying because it was really powerful and blew me away. And then I was sitting up when it was over. So I was fully awake when it was happening.
but you knew you weren't sleeping when it
No,
happened.
I was sitting up wide awake in bed and we were having a conversation and I was crying and then it ended and I was still sitting up in bed crying. So it
Wow.
was really wild.
That
Wow.
is. And to then not feel validated when you
Yeah.
told that would make you feel like, oof, this isn't right. That would turn it off.
Yeah. I tried.
And honestly, Karen and I talk to so many people. I would say most don't actually physically see people. So that's really special.
So what made you come out of the closet as the psychic soccer mom?
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
have a funny story about it. I decided that I was too old to squirrel this like part of me away. And, I love all these parts of myself, but this one little part didn't quite fit with the version that I wanted to be. And if I am not living like a fully authentic life and telling my kids, be your most authentic self, doesn't matter if people like it, just be yourself. But I didn't do it. I'm a sham mother. I can't not embrace all the parts of me. And so I started reading books and listening to podcasts, and I was too afraid to go see a psychic or an intuitive. So I went to Reiki. I had a Reiki session done when I used to live in Ventura, and it was wild and it felt really intense. And at the end, when she was doing it, I was having visions of the Reiki practitioner. And at the end, she was asking me how it was. And I didn't realize it, but I did a reading on her at our session. Said, oh, I saw you doing
That's
this.
so
And it
funny.
really resonated with her. And then I was telling my other mentor, who I found shortly thereafter, about it. And she said, you just did a reading on her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I met Thea. We have a podcast. We have taken a break from it for a little while, but she's an Ojai and she's an intuitive. She does Reiki. And I started doing sessions with her and it was amazing. It just totally opened up. And so my first reading that I ever went to was the one I did on her. And I was hosting a mom's brunch for my kids' school. They go to a small private nonprofit school. They were at the time. And I hosted a mom's brunch for a fundraiser. And I was always so worried that I didn't really want to be the psychic soccer mom. I really just wanted to be normal. I didn't want to be the psychic soccer mom. But I told myself that I was just going to go for it and just see what happened. And so at the brunch, they were talking. I said something about how did this reading on my mentor at the time. And they said, oh, you had a reading done? Tell me all about it. And I said, oh, no, I did it. And then everyone wanted a reading at the brunch. And so I started doing card pulls for people and did little mini readings. And then I've been out of the closet ever since.
Wow.
And the reaction was great, right?
I was so nervous that people were going to think, oh, this is so weird and it be negative. But I've never had anyone do that before. And I think that what I have noticed is that when I do talk about it, people always want to tell me about their intuitive stories, a time when they were intuitive or that they tapped into it because we can all do it. And so me talking about it gives someone else permission to do the same.
It does, again, back to we all have those experiences. We just don't think of ourselves as being different or special is a way that most people would look at it or different in some way. So I think that's so great. It's so funny how we all have our definition of what we think normal is until we start talking about other people, and it gives them that opportunity to share when we're really honest about our own experiences. So I love that it came out that way for you.
And I also wanted to ask, because I know you said part of reason that you even started to come out of that spiritual closet was because you saw your kids being intuitive. And what was it for you that made you recognize that?
My mother-in-law passed away several years ago, and we were talking about her one day. And my younger son at the time, he was little, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I see grandma all the time." And I said, "Oh, okay. You gotta make sure you know what you're doing here." And then my older one is super sensitive, super empathetic, and he feels it all. And I want him to know how to manage his energy and how to use that sensitivity as a tool and not have it feel like a burden.
Yeah, that would make me want to do something. And my daughter, similarly, when she was younger, was seeing my dad who passed away. So I can relate to that and having that responsibility of wanting to encourage and guide rather than squash it away so that they can be, in quotes, normal.
And I love in the intro how Robin had mentioned about being spiritually messy at times. And I think that's such wonderful permission that we should be able to give all of ourselves, right? Is that we don't necessarily know all the answers. We don't necessarily know what all of these intuitive hits might mean for us, but it's allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and also to have that curiosity and explore a little bit and not being afraid of where that will lead. And as a mom, giving your kids such a wonderful example of what that can look like for themselves, especially boys. I think because we tend to want to turn that emotional stuff off in them at an early age. And I'm looking at my little grandbaby boy and seeing how he's coming in so emotional and so tuned in to himself. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to really start them off early in that way.
I think so. I think about how I would have liked, if I would have grown up like that, how different it would have been. It would have felt like a gift.
Exactly.
And one more thing, too, before we move on, I wanted to ask when you brought up being in that time where it was like you were on a lower vibrational level, how since then do you make sure that you keep that stuff at bay? Because yes, we can all be positive and more high vibey most of the time, but we all have our days. So how do you keep that other kind of frequency away?
I talk to my guides and my angels just like I talk to you. And I said, I'm not open to receiving information from lower energies. It's only of the highest vibration, truth, love, and compassion. And I was calling it in because I was super low at the time and I didn't have the boundaries. So I think it's two things. I think be aware of your energy and what you're calling in, and then also have a boundary in case. Because there's times when you're going to be low and it's normal and it's fine. And those are times when you want to tap in and ask for guidance and peace and connection. But you have to have those boundaries in place. So then you're not. And it's not always scary either. You want to have boundaries. I used to get woken up a lot in the middle of the night. And Karen, your Nana woke me up like a couple weeks ago. But even then, it was like, okay, not now. I'm talking to her tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. You just have to have boundaries. And I find that my spirit team won't test me on my boundaries, I wouldn't say, but will make sure I'm keeping them up.
Yeah, I feel like you're my reminder to do that because that would happen to me as well. And I did have to put boundaries up, but I feel like I haven't done that particular call out. So I feel like you're my reminder.
Yeah. And then I was always nervous. So when I first started to really embrace it, I was nervous that if I had boundaries, it would turn it off. But actually, as soon as I started having boundaries, I found that I got information much more quickly, much more clearly, and it was better. It's almost, to me, it's if you have an appliance like low grade running all the time, it's not going to function that well. Like you turn it off and then you turn it on.
Yeah,
that's how it works for me.
Yeah, I was just envisioning almost like a phone receiver, right? And you put it down and it's open. Anybody can talk into it. Whereas if you're like, nope, I'm only going to take calls at this certain time from one person at a time.
Yeah.
It sends out that message. Can you talk a little bit about your spirit guides, Holly, and how did you identify them? How do you work with them?
I know some people get names and stuff. And when I first started out, I remember asking what their name was and hearing very clearly, you don't need to know. And I can tell. So for me, it feels like there are several, and I don't always necessarily know who I'm talking to, but sometimes it will feel female and very supportive, and sometimes it will feel like the one who said they didn't need to know their name. That was like a very assertive female energy. It was like, you got work to do. This is small potatoes. We're not gonna worry about this stuff. So I don't always know, but it usually has a feeling to me. Lately, I've been getting a lot of, and this is more newer for me, is Archangel Michael. He feels like he's right behind me sometimes, and he has a very distinct, like, visual image in my mind's eye. But normally, and I just saw a hawk is my spiritual sign, and I can see one right now just flying outside my window. So that's a sign from them too. And so I get signs. Sometimes it feels like talking. I do a lot of connecting. I do drop off and pick up for my kids at school. And when I'm in the car alone, I'll connect and I'll just talk like I'm talking to you. But sometimes I also love automatic writing for when you're first starting out. That's really cool and special and a really great way to connect. So I still do that as well.
So when you were getting going and developing and really honing in on these abilities, what did you do? I know you said you found a mentor, you were reading books. Were there any specific books that helped you very initially?
So I mentored with Thea Sullivan in Ojai, and she was amazing. She does more intuitive work, but I also wanted to know more about the mediumship because that was something I knew it was coming in, whether I wanted it to really or not. So I wanted to know how to do that more effectively. And so I read Marianne DeMarco's book, Medium Mentor, I think is what it was. And then I read Rebecca Rosen's book and I listened to her podcast. And I actually reached out to Rebecca Rosen and asked her if she took on students. And she said she didn't, but to contact Marianne DeMarco. And so I worked with her for several months and she is incredible and taught me all about how to do mediumship readings. And I've just been rolling ever since. I do think that every person can connect with their past loved ones. So I think even if you don't identify as a medium, you could connect with your passed on loved ones because there's that really strong energetic connection. So everyone's, I think, a medium in that way.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And we'll talk about our readings, but I think what we love too about the way you work is you do use the mediumship along with the intuition to really tell the story. And as we found, the story began with our deceased loved ones wanting to show up and validate the fact that they were there, but then also the intuitive kind of pathway you followed as a result of them being there. So should we talk a little bit about just the reading itself and how do you actually do them, Holly? Because as you mentioned, my grandmother woke you up. I'm really sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay. That was a sign to me. I need to have more firm boundaries, and I was letting them go.
I can see she was that type of person who wanted to make sure that she got the message out front row center. And I can see too with Robin's dad, who always comes through, she's like, I'm just going to get a jump on Bob.
That's right.
Probably. I find that no two readings are alike, and I open it up to whatever needs to come through in that session. And sometimes it's mostly intuitive, and I would say, and it's more I'm talking to their spirit team and their guides and their angels. But a lot of times it's a combo, like how it was with you guys, where it's a little bit of the mediumship. They're coming through to give you an intuitive message. And I think that's so powerful for someone to have their loved ones come through and say, hey, like, we need to look at this, or I want you to do this, or this would serve you well. And when I'm doing a reading, my chief clairs are I'm clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairaudient. And so I'll hear, I'll see, I'll feel. And you just get a vibe. Your grandma, she was like gonna be first. So
It usually is.
And you can just tell, like, this was a woman who was going to speak her mind and she wasn't going to wait for her turn. She wanted to go first. And that was her energy. And so for me, their energy usually comes through in the way they connect with me. And I always try to convey that, how I'm getting the message. Because when I was first starting out, I didn't always do that because I didn't know I was supposed to. And then I would look back and think, oh, I missed the magic there because I didn't say all the things. So I'll say, this is coming through really strongly, or I'll have some, this is really like a more gentle, quiet, stepping back kind of energy. And it usually matches the person's energy in this life.
What I love too for people who may not have had a reading before, what's so validating about that is that if you are at all trepidatious about, oh my gosh, what am I going to hear? And what is Holly going to say? This fact that my grandmother, Robin's dad, was a messenger kind of takes you out of the middle, right? The message
Yeah.
actually comes from them, the deceased loved one, and it feels so much more personal. It feels
Mhm.
more comfortable, feels more like you can be open to that because you're automatically envisioning them being the messenger. And I love that aspect of how.
Oh, thank you. I try very much to, it's not about me and what I can do. It's not about me. I find for some people, it's really helpful to have someone like me, like a medium or an intuitive, say what they're getting. And I find that the really intuitive clients are saying, oh, yeah, I know.
That's
It's
true.
nice for them to hear it from someone else, but it's really not about me and what I can do. It's almost like a game of telephone, and I'm just like the middle one, but I'm not interjecting. And I
Yes.
try really not to. I'll be in a session and I'll say, this is my opinion. This is the Holly opinion on this, not the spiritual opinion. Because if I feel, I will say if I have a strong opinion on it, but I always give the caveat, that's my opinion, not this otherworldly opinion.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting in both of our readings is that messages for our daughters came up initially, which, and I was going to ask you how you tell people to prepare for your reading, because I know I've gotten into a habit of preparing for readings in my own way, just because this is part of what I do. So I have my own way of setting an intention and asking questions. And I always find it interesting, the information that comes in isn't necessarily what I, as Robin, thinks is the most important. It's not always what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear.
That's so well said. And I think that the only thing you need to do to prepare is to go in being open to getting messages. And then in your case and Karen's case and so many other people's, you're often the messenger. And
Yes.
I find that spirit will use any way they can to get a needed message across. So I just tell people to prepare for a reading, come in open and don't just think of one thing. I always leave time for questions at the end of a session, but be open to what comes through, be open to being a messenger for people in your life, and be open to, because whatever you hear is exactly what you need to hear in that moment. And it would be different the next day and then the next day. It's never the same. So
That's
just
right.
be open.
And I think that was what was so interesting, is that when the messages that were coming in for both of us, at first we were trying to apply it directly to ourselves. And then we both quickly realized that they were actually about our daughters. And they were important messages and they were practical messages, which I also think is really funny. It wasn't like super lofty. These were like, this is what she needs to do to get through this, which is really cool. Like, I don't think people realize you can get that specific about different issues that you may be going through in your life.
I love like a lofty, heady kind of vibe sometimes, but I live in like the real world. And I'm always telling people, I want to give you something you can use. Give me something I can use. I want actionable items on my list. I want to know what can I do to be a better version of me today, not necessarily being super philosophical. And I find that in my readings, when it comes through me, that usually is how I want to give you something you can do that day and it will feel good. And that's how your guides, your angels, your loved ones, if you're doing a reading with me, they know that's how I like to work. And so that's what comes through.
And the reminder, as you said before, like we can do this too. I'm working with those loved ones and guides and reminding my grandmother and Robin's dad are always there in these readings. But I think for anyone who might just have one reading with you, just to remind them that loved one is always there to work with them. They're always behind the scenes, watching over us, wanting to help, wanting to offer any advice and guidance as well. And I love that aspect for people who aren't used to working that way with their deceased loved ones. So it just opens up that door for them to really do their own work and start paying attention to the messages themselves.
Totally. I think that's so much more powerful than having to come see me to do it.
And I do want to make a comment. There's so much since even in the last few weeks from the time we did the reading. One of the things that came up, which seemed small, but has really been noticeable, is that my dad, who was making lots of funny dad jokes basically and puns, which was ridiculous, but so him, is that he said he was going to come through with coins. And that was never a thing. And he said this is going to be a new sign to, in quotes, change it up.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I haven't even told Karen this. I've been getting dimes from my dad for sure. There's no, in the weirdest places. And it was so much so yesterday, I was doing sit-ups in this corner of my basement, which there's no reason there would be any coins down there at all. And I'm down there pretty often. And out of nowhere, I looked at the corner of my eye and there was this dime tucked up. And I was like, are you kidding me? And it sounds so, but I know it was purposeful. I know it was him. And for that to have been called out in the reading with you was such validation. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Oh, I love hearing that. And I have chills as you're saying it. So that's like a big yes sign for me. So yeah, that's your dad giving you signs.
And that is a new one.
Yeah, and I'll just offer this too. Like for mine, my grandmother started talking about the month of April, which is my daughter's birthday. And it was funny. I mentioned the reading to her because my daughter's, oh, no one ever really comes through for me in readings. And I'm like, Grandma Jane's, she was like pretty adamant that we mention you and how well you're doing with her kid. And she mentioned April, which is your birthday month. And she's, yeah, it's a big one, Mom. It's my 35th. And I'm like, wait,
Oh,
what? I was like, how did that, wait, that's not, it didn't even realize for me that it was a big birthday for her. And she's not a birthday person, but like it started this whole conversation about what do you want to do with your birthday and where do you want to, so it was such a magical opening for a conversation that we may not had in the same way. And it felt like it was orchestrated by her and that she was actually part of it. So it can go that way too, right? It doesn't have to be some extreme revelation. It can just be a doorway to really opening up dialogue that they too can feel like they're part of, that validates that they're still around and part of your day to day, which I love.
I find that when spirituality is day to day and it is small, I find it's almost more meaningful because it's
Yeah.
if it's every day and that's where you're living every day, then that's way more impactful. She wants her to celebrate her 35th birthday. She wants it to be a bigger birthday than the other ones. And so that might feel small, but I bet you it is really important to her.
Exactly. I think sometimes we go into these readings feeling like we need this grand revelation of some kind to validate that it's real. And you're right. I think it's just these little, because that would be something that she would do. Birthdays were always big for her. It just makes so much sense. And really getting us to pay attention to something that is important that we may not have given the attention to. So you're absolutely right, Holly. That's a really good point about readings.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too about this idea of talking about and how to use it in daily life is one of the major things that came up for us in our reading was how to use seeking center in your real life, which is what we're always about. But we were really being encouraged to write a book about that. And it was literally seeking center in real life. So I think it's no coincidence that we're even talking about that now.
I forgot about that until you just said it. Because I sometimes it goes right afterwards. But
Yeah.
yeah, and because I find your divine soul in a human body having a human experience. This is where we do the work and this is where we learn and do it in real life. That's where I think we really get to grow and expand our lives and our experiences here on Earth energetically.
I came here as Robin, you came here as Holly, Karen came as Karen. And yet we also came to, as you said, to have the human experience, but to also to remember and reconnect with that soul part of ourselves. I think that's part of the journey here is the remembering. And then how do you use that to accomplish what you did come here to do as Holly, Karen, and Robin?
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to get caught in the very human side. And there are days where I feel like I'm really just in my human side. I'm just like laundry, cooking, cleaning, like the things, work. And then I think on this side too, you can almost go too far where I'm just meditating, like nothing
Yes.
bothers me. I'm doing these like retreats and it's beautiful. But I like it somewhere in the middle. I think you've got to have a mix because I think that's what we're supposed to do. I think you're supposed to remember your soulful side and your spiritual side, your divinity, but in your human life and blend the two. And it's not going to be cut and dry. There's going to be days where you meditate more and it feels really beautiful. And maybe you do go on that retreat, but bring it back into the real world because this is where you get to have your impact on a lot of other souls.
It's so true. And I think we talk about that a lot, right? How do you balance the two? Because we are all living real day-to-day lives with kids and we pay bills and we go to the grocery store and all those things are necessary to our 3D existence. But it's having these tools, I don't even call them tools, but like having this understanding that this is a purpose. There's a purpose for all of it. So yes, we're here to drive the car and do the laundry and all of the things. And yet there's just this magical overlay of understanding that can really help lighten this journey for us and give it understanding that we wouldn't have if we didn't know about some of these other opportunities in this kind of 5D existence. And that's what I love about it. It can help us stop even in those moments where we're just like, oh my God, I don't want to do any more laundry, or I don't want to empty out the dishwasher or have that conversation with that person. It's like there's just so much opportunity on a spiritual level in those things to make them meaningful.
Or
So
just you're doing sit-ups and you don't want to do any more sit-ups and then you see a dime from your dad. Like,
Exactly. That's right. That's such a great point.
I think it brings a certain level of magic to your
Yeah.
life that makes life so much more fun and special and beautiful and magical. And we all deserve to have a magical life.
exactly, like looking up and seeing that 555 or the 44. That always makes me feel happy. It makes me feel like I'm on my journey in the right direction and somebody's looking out for me.
So true. Or the song comes on that you haven't heard and it reminds you of that person that may have passed away and that kind of thing. It's those moments to your point. And they do happen in real life if you're open to being aware and seeing them.
And it just reminds me, I've had this quote, and it's like a beautiful framed canvas, and I had it in my son's room, and it's that Roald Dahl quote, watch with glittering eyes the whole world around you, because magic's in the most unlikely places, and only those who believe, I'm butchering the quote, but it's like only those who believe in it will see it. So if you're open to magic, you'll see it. And if you're not, you won't.
I love that. So when you are helping people start to really come into more of their intuitive abilities or really incorporate spirituality into their daily life, what do you suggest that they do? How do you start working with people in that way?
So every single person's different. And when you're starting to tap in, your spirit guides and your team, they will use whatever you have going on now. So if you are artistic, they'll use your artistic abilities. If you are someone who has to move and you love to exercise and run, that's what they'll use. They'll use what you love. So I always encourage clients to think about, where do they feel the most connected right now? When do you feel most at peace? Was it when you're cooking? Is it when you're on a hike? And we start from there. But I find that your team will use your human gifts. And then that's usually where your spirituality should start too. Because I think that you can meditate in so many ways. It can be cooking. That's a big one for me, is I love to cook and I will really enjoy it and tap into like a flow. But for some people, it's singing at the top of their lungs in the car when they're driving. That's when they feel the energy and that's when they feel in tune. And so I think there needs to be a conversation where we demystify that it doesn't have to be on a meditation pillow with a crystal with sage. Sometimes that's really nice and lovely. I don't get to do that very often. I'm at a desk covered in Legos as we speak. It's not really practical for me, but it's nice when it happens. But just knowing that you can do it anywhere, anyway, anyhow, it's whatever resonates is what I would say.
It seems to me there's a consistency to what you're talking about. So you were talking about how you do drop off and pick up, and that you may have 15 minutes or 30 minutes in a car waiting for your kids, and you know you have that time. So that's a time for you to tap in, right? So maybe you wouldn't necessarily make a phone call at that time. Instead, use it as many times as you can to tap in. And you know you're going to cook most days or
Yeah.
however many days a week. And you know during that time, then you don't have to plan for it. It just happens.
And then that's when you do it. If you're having to plan it out, and just so no one feels bad, when I first started, I would try so hard to do it the right way. And I would try to have my meditation pillow and I have crystals and I burn sage. And inevitably, I tell this story often when I do talks, is that I was doing that and I had my kids homesick and I would hear a scream and it's, oh, wait, is that a happy scream? Is that a fighting scream? And you're inevitably going to get interrupted. And so finding a way to do it and infusing it into your daily life is when you're really going to feel the powerful effects of it because you're actually going to do it. Fold laundry meditatively. Do it without the headphones in. Just open yourself up. And a lot of people need to be doing something to turn that frontal lobe side of our brains off. And then they're open. So cooking, folding laundry, driving a car. These are the times when you're on autopilot. Shower. A lot of people get downloads in the shower.
I'm raising my shot. That really is like a faucet of information.
For me, it's running in nature. It's quiet time where I can just let my brain go. And that's the key, isn't it? It's allowing your brain just to not be in the to-do list and not being in the day-to-day.
And I turn it off the most easily for me with if I'm doing something. I find it harder if I'm sitting still. Like you'll have to sit longer to get to the same spot.
Yeah, I find that as well. Is there anything else that you suggest to people in terms of tapping in?
I always say that to first start with the assumption that you can do it, that you absolutely can do it, because every single person I've ever met has an intuition story. And I also encourage them. I always have all my clients write what I call an intuitive history, all of the times where you got an intuitive hit. And I think it's super powerful because then you can get a sense of how you receive intuitive information. Do you hear it on the radio or like on a song? Is that how you connect? Or is it you hear it in your mind's, I always say my mind's ear, or is it just a gut feeling? And I always have them write their intuitive history on the times they listened and on the times they didn't, because that's when you get a lot of information too on how you receive information. I always start with having my clients, we figure out how they receive their information. What are their chief clairs? Because that is a great place to start. And you can start with what your human gifts are and then writing your intuitive history to seeing how you get downloads and how you get information, because we all get them. And some people just call them gut feelings, but that's intuition. So I would have them revisit, when did you have that gut feeling? Was it high in your belly? Was it low? How did it feel? Was it a twist? And we piece that together and figure it out.
That's really helpful. I love that you call it that.
Yeah, the gut feeling actually helps because I was listening to you thinking, I know people would say to me, I didn't have an intuitive hit. It can be so subtle. It's not like you have a vision of something.
It can be that, I don't know, for me, sometimes I'm in the other room and I'll just have a feeling, oh, they're fighting. And we have a 2-story house, and so I'll come upstairs and sure enough, there's a epic argument going on up here that I couldn't hear from downstairs. But every mom has known that their kids are doing something naughty from the other room, and that's intuition.
Yeah, or it could be for your pet too, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Knowing when your dog has to go outside, that's an energetic communication. That's not just a guess. And so it's so everyday, but it's so everyday we dismiss it.
Yes.
And we don't call it intuition. And once you start calling it intuition, you realize, oh my gosh, I do have this superpower. I can do this. And then it gives your team the green light. They want to do more and they will bring it to you.
I want to also ask, I know we've talked about readings, but you really do help people develop this.
Yeah, so I do intuitive coaching and I love readings, and readings are so powerful and I think they're really fun and I love doing them. I especially love doing group readings for families, are super cool experiences. But intuitive coaching is really my most favorite thing because I'm teaching you how to do a reading for yourself. And everyone can learn how to do it, every single person. And it's so cool because then you learn how to access the magic on your own and you don't need someone to do it for you. And you can do it every day.
How long does it usually take, would you say, for people to recognize that they can do it?
The people who want to work on it are usually already pretty intuitive already, and they just want to hone it. I've only ever had a couple of people say that they're not intuitive and they can't, but these weren't clients. This was at like a large event. Then they said they weren't intuitive, but everyone has an intuitive story. And usually after the first session, they're like, oh my gosh, you were right. I knew this person was going to call me, or I knew I had to go to this place. And it's usually after the first session it starts that you've turned the volume up. And I always say it's the volume's on, your guidance system's on, you just don't have the volume turned up. And so we turn the volume up, and then it's okay, I know which way I should go. And how empowering is that? I can't drive without my navigation system, so I have to have it.
And it's also honing that trust. I think that so many of us don't really fully trust ourselves, and it's really giving ourselves enough opportunity to repeat that over and over again so that we start to see the evidence that we actually can trust that.
And that's why I have people write their intuitive histories, because once you start writing it down, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm really intuitive. I had all these things that I knew, or I knew which way to go or what to do. And I knew once you start going back in time and looking, you realize you're really intuitive.
I think that's really smart. I was just even thinking, and I brought this up on the podcast before, but when I was in college and I met my husband for the first time, and we were just in a class together, and I had this voice that I honestly had no clue what it was. It felt bizarre and foreign. It was like, that boy is going to play an important role in your life out of nowhere. And I remember looking around being like, who just said that? And sure enough, took a while, but he is my husband and my soulmate and all the things. But I had no word for what that was. I didn't understand. I felt a little crazy, never told anybody at that time. But now I have words for it. And now I understand it. And I think doing that intuitive history, where you think you're not going to have anything, if you just take a few moments, you're going to be surprised, because there are going to be these very key moments in your life. And I think you also said this, which is where you either listened to whatever that little voice was, or you listened, but then went the other way. And either way, it's important.
And then, too, I think that when you look back at when you've made choices from a gut feeling, that's intuition. And those decisions where you can't really do it on paper, like who to marry, a job to take, or you can do the pros and cons list, but at the end of the day, you make a gut decision, and everyone has experience with making a decision from a gut feeling.
Yeah.
And that's just what intuition is.
Yeah, it is. And remember too, that question made me really start my little catalog of memories. And it's, the voice can be really loud. I don't know, for me, sometimes that voice is so loud, I can't ignore it when it's saying, do this. And I wonder for others, it's just we never talk about the voice.
And my mentor, Marianne DeMarco, said that the voice can sound like you.
Yes, it does sound like you.
In a reading, the dad jokes that were coming through sounded like me saying them, but I don't talk like that. And so it wasn't me, but I hear it in my voice. Like you, I've only a handful of times heard a voice that was not my voice. So it can sound like you, or it can sound, I think when it's really important and you might miss it is when it's louder and maybe not in your voice.
Yeah, that's true.
Through is just a feeling too. It can be like, oh, there's a drawing of a yearning almost that comes with something that really just feels like it would be a good thing, even though everything would tell you like that is not logical. That does not make sense for you to want that or do that. That is intuitive as well. You may not hear a thing, but it's just have to do that. Just feels like the right thing to do. That's how we all get our inner guidance system. It all works a little bit differently, but it's all intuition.
I love that you offer something, you call it, I think, a 21-day jumpstart.
Oh, yeah.
How and why did you come up with that?
That's what I wanted to have. When I first started out, I wish I would have had an easy roadmap that was doable. I felt like when I was starting out and looking for things, everything felt not doable, and not doable in the sense that I couldn't do it, but I couldn't do it and fit it into my life. And so I wanted something that I could give people that was easy. They could do a little bit every day. And then after doing something for 21 days, you're going to feel that shift. You're going to feel that change. You're going to feel more intuitive. You're going to feel more in touch with your energy and with the energy of your loved ones around you in this world and the next. And so I just made it because that's what I wish I would have had.
Is there a universal message that you hear across the board that you feel like people really should hear?
So I did a little channeling before we started.
Yay.
I just felt like I was supposed to. And so what really came through, specifically, I did it for your listeners, was do not doubt your power. that we all have the ability to connect and that we are all divine souls. And sometimes our lives make it difficult to remember our own divinity and that we all have power and that we just get busy and it gets lost in the shuffle. But to take a minute to breathe into it, tap into it, and feel into it because you have that power. You have an intuitive power, an intuitive gift, and it's in there. And so if you're listening, this is your sign to do that, that you have those gifts. And this is your sign from your team, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. You have that power.
That's awesome. I hope that those that are listening or watching really hear it and listen to that. Do something about it. Start paying attention.
And it can be small. I always have people start small. Session 1 of intuitive coaching, we're not going to channel like your passed on loved ones. You're asking for directions on which way to go to school that day. Start small, simple, and ask for signs. I think signs are a really great way to start out too. This one day when I was like starting on my journey, I remember saying, is this real? Can I really do this? Is this real? I feel like I'm just insane. I just feel nuts. And I said, show me a hawk if this is real. And literally before I had finished formulating the request, I heard a hawk in my backyard. I went for a walk and I was walking by one of those little free libraries and they always face the book spine out lined up. And this book was faced cover out and it said H is for hawk.
Oh my God.
And then on the same walk, I saw 2 hawks fly and land on a telephone wire. And so then I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. It's real. I'm not insane. And then I get home and I go in my backyard and there's 2 hawks in my backyard. And I lived in a very suburban neighborhood. We didn't just have a hawk. I'm not like out in the woods. We didn't have hawks around. So if you ask for a sign, your spirit team's going to show up and show off.
Show up, show off. I love that. Especially Bob and my
Yeah, the change.
Oh, yeah. And I want to say too that even when you have been on this road, which we've been on for quite some time, I still ask for signs. I still want to feel that magic. And I'm always shocked by it. I really am. I think that is what's incredible is that I'm still in awe. Every day I'm in awe because I need constant validation that I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I think maybe that's a little bit of my overachieverness.
So a hawk ever since then is now my default sign that I'm on the right path. For me, it's like a highlight. Like my team's like highlighting, like this is a yes. When we were talking, I forgot what you were even saying at the time, but like I saw a hawk circling right here. And it doesn't have to be a real animal. It could be like the book that had the word hawk on it. Yes. I set a default sign. And then when you see it, it's a highlighter for yes.
Oh, that's a great...
I love that you call it that. I think that's really smart. If you listen to this podcast, 1117, it's one of my defaults for sure. And so are a couple other key things. And I see them in the most random of places. Or if I see my dad's name, literally, Bob, that comes up a lot too. It's like, all right, I get it.
That is a really good tip for early
It is.
keepers in the game. Start just jotting down what are the things that you keep on seeing and validate them for yourself that they are continuing to come up because it's easy to doubt yourself and it's easy to do exactly what you did, Holly. It's really anything. And I think the more you keep track of it, it seems like the more you actually see.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a lot of power. And I literally have the notes app on my phone. I don't do it as much anymore, but when I would see a sign, I would write it down. And I think it's really important to note the sign and then what were you thinking about? What were you feeling? That's what your team's really highlighting. And so I have clients that just keep their intuitive history on their phone and then in the notes app. And then when something happens, they just type it up and then that's it. And they can remember. And then if you're feeling, because there's going to be times when you don't really feel super connected and you feel, oh my gosh, like I'm not really intuitive. And go back and reread that. See where you got your hits. See how you got them. And then remember your intuitive power. That's the real big message. Remember your power. Because you all have it.
And you make it really accessible, Holly. I think that's what's also extremely special about you is that you're bringing this down to a very realistic and accessible level for people so that they can see that magic is in every day and can be, and that we all have this power that you can use. And frankly, I think we're supposed to use.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You're not meant to grind it out. You're supposed to live a beautiful, magical life, and your team is trying to get you there. But if the volume on your guidance system is turned down and you keep taking the wrong turns, the minutes rack up. and it's going to be a less enjoyable trip. So turn the volume up, pay attention and to yourself. And everyone has that gift. It means the world to me that that's how it comes across, because that's my soul's purpose, is to make it every day. And that's the name of the podcast that my friend Athea and I do. It's called Everyday Intuition, because we really think it's every day, and it should be, because otherwise, what's the point?
I know. It makes the world go from black and white to color.
Oh, that's such a cool way to think of it.
And there are so many in this world that they are living in that black and white, and they think it has to be really hard. But it really is. I love what you said. It's turning the dial, because it's just that easy. And you can do it in those small ways.
Yeah, start small, make it feel safe and easy. And it just doesn't have to be super ethereal or earth shattering. It can literally be, which way do I drive to work today?
Yeah, I will say that is partly why Karen and I created Seeking Center. We love our crystals. I wear a lot of them.
Yeah, I love crystals.
However, it doesn't matter. As you said, and as your guides said to all of us, we have the power. It is that easy. We all have it. You can access it anytime, any day. And it doesn't have to look like anything. It doesn't have to be what we think that we've seen in the past, sitting on a meditation pillow, as you said. It isn't that. This is something we should be using in our daily lives. So we really hope that everybody listening today gets that and starts to play with it.
Yeah, and play with it is such a good, I love that term, play with it, because it is meant to be played with. And when you approach it from a playful energy, it's going to hit differently and it's going to show up differently. And I just think it's really easy to get caught in the trap of what it's supposed to look like. Yeah. So I went from thinking what a good mom and wife looked like to what a good psychic looked like. And I didn't feel like I could do either one. So I just said, screw it. And now I just do it however I want to do it, because you can't do it. I couldn't meditate on a meditation pillow. Mine's usually in a pile of clean laundry on the bed, because that's when I get my minute. And so I think if you let go of how it's supposed to look and how it's supposed to feel, that's when you do it. And that's when it comes through.
I have one more question, which is, when you get up in the morning, do you feel like you are already receiving info? Because I'm assuming you have 2 young boys. Your mornings can probably be a little crazy. I don't know. Sometimes you're woken up.
So not as much anymore as I used to be, because they're getting older. But when I first started off, I would consciously turn it off every night because I was getting woken up a lot. I don't consciously turn it off now. It's just like default office hours, if that makes sense. And I also have really strict boundaries. So I'm open, to answer your question, I am open. Once my eyes are open, I'm open for receiving messages from me and my family, but I am not open for receiving messages for everyone, because I think that's really intrusive. I don't know. To me, it seems like sometimes stuff will come through if it's for a close friend and we're having a conversation and we're talking, and there seems to be that openness. I will channel and it will come through, but they're open to it. I don't just read strangers. I told someone it's like watching someone spiritually undress. I would never, ever just read people, because I just think it's too intrusive. I get information from myself and my family from the moment I wake up, but some days I'm up and I'm making breakfast and it's flowing. Other days it's, okay, this kid needs this morning. Make sure we do this, which I think most moms would say is not intuition, but it is. Back to that, if you call it by its name, it becomes that much more powerful.
Oh, that's really helpful. For those that are curious, to start with these little ideas that were given throughout this entire episode. And if you want to dive in further, you can work with Holly. You can visit hollyfranke.com, and that's Frank with an E. And you also can reach out and see if you want to have a reading with her. We highly recommend those, because not only are you going to receive very important and detailed information, you're also going to have actionable items to work on after, which Karen and I love. And you deliver it in such a beautiful way too. Really, you have these takeaways, which is so important, because Karen and I are all about, what do you do with this information after? Because it's cool and it's fun to receive, but then what? And that you give them the now what.
You guys are really dream clients, because you come in open and you take your spiritual prescription and you're doing it, which is also, The more you act on your intuition or the guidance you receive, the more that's you giving your team the green light that you're ready for more. So when you act on your spiritual RX, then your team knows, okay, she's ready. We can do more now.
Thank you, Holly. We look forward to working with you more in the future.
Thank you. Me too.